Thanks, Mrs. Roti. While I'm driving, I'm certainly not the mind behind all of this. That's very much Louisa's job, which she's been doing a huge amount of research, and you'll find that I'm on camera, sorry. My wild ADHD is going to kick in quite a lot, and the need to keep coming back here to be on the film is going to kick in a lot. So just to let you know, Lou's been, what we're doing and how we do it is deeply based on research, a lot of collaboration, a lot of chats, and all the rest. So we're very excited, and I'm going to get going. Right. So as Lou said, the purpose of today is to bring you up to speed with our action plans, and that's in the social emotional learning and the outdoor learning. There's been an evolution in both schools of thought. It's, as I said, deeply based on research. It really is exciting, and it's targeted at equipping our children with viable, sustainable skills going forward. So it's not just for the here and the now. The programs they'll go through have been designed as forward thinking, and the structures are in such a way that the teachers and the adults can weave opportunities for growth. You'll see the difference between the restorative processes of the social and emotional compared to what perhaps Mike and I were exposed to at an all-boys school are very, very different. So the idea is to try and get ourselves out of that, let's call it archaic ways of thinking, and go from there. We follow a restorative process, as I was saying, rather than the old school punitive process. And I think for me, the essence really is, if Mike and I would have had a fight in the corridors at school, we would have been called in, one of us would have been thrashed, had to apologize to the other bloke, and lesson done. He's learned a lesson. He feels that he's been looked after, and off you go. Actually, there's been very little learning that's taken place, and very, very little growth. So the idea behind this and the key points, there you are. Thanks, Andrew. I lost my computer. The key points and the philosophy behind the social emotional program, what I'm going to try and unpack now. So I'll stick with the analogy of the fight, Mike, if you don't mind. We were at school together, but we didn't ever fight. So as long as we're clear on that. So the first thing is that behaviour's got consequences, and it's really a case of trying to, I think, noticing that there are positive consequences to behaviour as well as negative consequences, and keeping those in mind when we deal with the process. Can you see it okay, Meg? Yeah. Is primary concern. The second thing is to take accountability or take responsibility for your behaviour. So accountability is key. In the retributive practices, as I was saying, if Mike and I got into a fight, once he'd finished thrashing me, the key focus for the people handling us would have been to make Michael feel guilty and to make me feel kind of patted and grown from there. With restorative practices, the accountability is actually the accountability is understanding that there's been a wrong done and that things need to be rebalanced. So that's the focus we put into that one. The needs of the victim and the transgressor, both of us need to be considered. Hello, Mrs. Flocky. The next thing, the third key really is recognize that behaviour's got a wide impact, and that it's not just the two of us that have had a fight. There'll be far bigger knock-ons and consequences. So it's bringing the children to the point where they say, "Oh, flip! What I've done has had an impact on this person, that person," and just realizing that there's a bigger picture to perhaps sometimes impulsive behaviour. Then again, sticking with that fight, it's a case of taking ownership and then trying to repair, and I'll call it harm. The process that we use will benefit both the transgressor and the victim. And once they take accountability and then realize an ownership for their behaviour, then you've got the buy-in to the process continuing and then expanding. Even saying sorry is taking ownership. As long as you're saying, "I'm sorry, I know that I hurt your feelings, I won't do it again," or "If I start doing this, please could you?" And I mean, this might sound a bit pie in the sky at some stage, but there have been situations already, even this year, where I've had a chance to sit down with 2 or 3 or 4 individuals and say, "Hey, listen, do you know what you've done?" And often there's a bit of a blinkered approach, and they don't know. So once we start unpacking that where damage has been done, and accountability and responsibility are taken, then it becomes a far bigger growth process for the children. Those that are victims also are given the skills to say, "Hey, I don't like that, you're hurting my feelings," and then it's a case of empowering oneself as well. So far so good. Learning from mistakes is the next one, and then recognizing the impact that the transgressor or the baddie has had on things, then that needs to kick in. And then when we make amends, it's got to be making amends sincerely. So not just a case of saying, "I'm sorry," it's a case of recognizing where the damage has been done, how it's been done, what's been done, and then having to backfill that. What we're finding with this process is that empathy of the children really is on the up. There's far more respect for one another, and I've probably tapped into our values a bit soon there. I warned you about my ADHD. The respect has kicked in. There's far more understanding and acceptance and tolerance even of one another. And I'm going to unpack the how in a second. So we focus on the future. And this differs because I think, again, with our fight, it would be a case of guilt would have been apportioned based on what I had done, rather on how I'm going to go forward and not to revisit this process. So all of this is coming together quite nicely, I think, in what we're doing and how we're rolling out our social emotional learning. And the last one, and I've hinted at it already, is the importance of values. Again, if we think back to, I'll use my own school quite a lot, hopefully I won't be reported. The rules were what governed things, not values. So it was a case of saying, don't do, rather than be empathetic, be consultative, be understanding. But so the values are what's going to drive our processes rather than rules. Values are overarching, we've got to remember that, and rules are really specific. Right, so next one, sir. You're there already. We can't see it very well. We're using this framework, it's called the SEL framework. And our plan for the year is based on evidence from here. So, Meg, I'll probably send a copy of this out as well. I'm sorry. I'll blame the brightness. The SEL framework has got 5 focal points. And these become a focus for pretty much everything we do. We can't whack all 5 of the points for reasons I'll explain now. But for now, within our classes, tutor groups, on the sports field and boarding, any situation we come across, we're trying to focus on these. So the first one is self-awareness. And I think making children aware of who they are, how they're behaving, what they're giving out is really, really important. The second one is self-management. I did a lovely, I'm jumping around it. Did a lovely workshop with the grade 4s and 5s and the 6s and 7s about thoughts and feelings and actions. And if you recognize that you, as an example of becoming angry, then we've just tried to give little coping systems for how do you cope with your anger, how do you manage your anxiety, and these are real things for our children, you know. Anxiety, stress, anger, fear. We could keep going for a long, long time. So it's a case of self-managing, recognizing where our triggers are, I suppose, and then trying to handle those. Social awareness. That speaks to a greater community involvement as well as within our classrooms. Relationship skills, and then responsible decision making. I think responsible decision making probably is going to be quite a big focus for us this year as well. So we're focusing on being proactive rather than reactive, and we're equipping children with the skills to grow in competence and experience within those 5, what should we call them, 5 bits of pie of the SEL framework. So the next one is how, Mr. Gwala. Brilliant. I'm sure you can't read that, so I'll talk you through it. The process we've realized has got to be organic. We can't come in with a living process. We can't come in with this is how we've got to be doing things. So we're trying to, again, with our little workshops and chats, we're trying to grow the process, but not just in such a way that it's just one person dictating. It's got to be a whole school speak. As an example, I mean, when our little staff meetings we had, our staff development courses, was giving teachers 4 questions to ask when things have gone wrong. And I'll unpack those a bit later, but we're trying to make it a whole school speak, not just, and also so that the situations aren't just handled by the teachers. Children are now becoming able to manage situations themselves, and that for me is the biggest win, that we can, I suppose, be more aware of each other. There's got to be consistent, explicit instruction, and getting these skills across. And this is how we do it. So Mrs. Roti runs social emotional lessons in grade 4 and 5, and she uses stories. I suppose fables might be another way of doing this. So basically, they're beautifully written, and she's got a huge library of them. And that helps children to identify characters and they're going through stuff. So there might be a child who's anxious, there might be a child who's angry, all those little emotions we've spoken about. And what we're finding is that there's a huge amount of empathy being used by the children. They connect with the children in the stories. There's lots of chat. I think quite a lot of vulnerability as well from the children to say, this is how I would deal with this is what I would do. And you know, for Lou to have that time with the grade 4s and the 5s particularly, I think is invaluable. Class teacher sessions and tutor sessions are also opportunities that we use to discuss school values, values that we'd like to see in other people, and how to handle little situations that might crop up. And then what we've done within the school, again, back to it being an explicit thing, is to use our school's value system and then hammer home each of those values. We spent the whole of last term using respect as the vehicle for things. So everything was handled about respect, not just for other people, but for oneself, for the things around us, for people's ideas. So there was really quite a nice, I suppose, percolation through of that. We're using perseverance as our theme for this term. And I don't know if you're in assembly with Mr. Prinsloo on Monday. He was even able to pick out a child who had a bit of a bad run in one of the sports things, and then without being too specific, the child had persevered and seen the benefit. So the explicit, I mean, if the headmaster's using it, then we know that everybody's using it, and hopefully we'll keep these, not hopefully, we must keep these values going. Children's workshops, I alluded to that earlier. We have grouped the grade 4s and 5s into one little bundle, and the 6s and 7s, and every term we spend time with them towards the end of the term, just doing a workshop on stuff that we feel is necessary. So as I said, first term was thoughts, feelings, and actions. We'll be focusing on social skills at the end of this term, and then it'll progress through the year. Assemblies, the messages carried through there, and then basically we take any, I suppose those are the explicit planned ones. The idea also is to take, and the practice also is to take any opportunity that pops up, and then to try and push our how into things. So we look at incidental situations where you can talk to children about taking risks, about gaining perspective, about empathy, and making the most of those events. And that's when we're chatting to the boarding staff. It happens in the classrooms, obviously, on the playing field, in the boarding house, and the sports field too. So there's a really cool overarch there. We're trying, and I think this is the first one of these, is to make intentional partnerships between teachers and school as well. I mean, I think our focus for all of us is that the children need to be given all these skills. We need to focus on the children. So by having us as a team, I think, or we think, is the most powerful way forward. And I've mentioned already that we have little staff meetings where these tools are pushed across. I really hope I'm sticking to my notes. I am. Right. So we crack on. That in a nutshell really, folks, is the social emotional process. We want to keep this going. We will keep it going just by, and I think again by constantly evaluating the how and the why, and just empowering. The focus is on empowering the children rather than us just drilling down and being the ownership of discipline or justice or whatever it might be. Again, I spoke about evolutions and I spoke about growth and I spoke about being intentional about things. So one of the other areas we've had a very, very close intentional look at is our outdoor program. Basically, I mean, if we've got 56 or 60 hectares of this beautiful space, the feeling was that we need to make more of it. I think one of the days where you can say, right, guys, hook off into top woods and build a fort. We need to start equipping and making, as I say, making the most of what we've got and maximizing it. We've got to be more intentional and more proactive. So that's been our outdoor learning sort of mantra, if you like. And I'll just unpack how we've done that. Right. Can you read that at all? I wonder. No. Okay. No, it must get curtains again. So we've got an outdoor learning curriculum which we've devised as teachers, and we've collaborated on what we feel is necessary and how we feel it's necessary to us. It hasn't just been a thumb suck. So you might have seen gardens and things popping up. You might have seen children heading towards, I suppose, the memorial garden is another case in point. You might have heard about an outdoor classroom day. So we're trying to make this more and more intentional. Essentially, the landscape needs to become the textbook, and the skills then extend naturally into the child's experience. So what you're learning out there then percolate through what we're doing. The garden boxes I've spoken to already. The basis here, and if you haven't got signs up yet, but Mr. Feenstra decided he'd like to sort of grassland study. So we've got 5 or 6 different grasslands in there. Mrs. Roti is doing medicine in her social sciences, so the medicinal plants in there. Each teacher is working on their own little theme. We've got a worm farm going on the side as well, so the idea is to just keep pushing there. We're going to develop ecological values, learn science skills, and then, as I've said, different themes are covered in each grade. So the idea is to get a sort of a complex engagement at each level, which then hopefully will come together and make a really tight structure. It's a school-wide commitment. So we're all involved, and it's a school-wide initiative as well. So all of you, I think, have been through the grade 4 farming process. and just seeing how much A, your children love that, and B, how much they've grown from it. So the idea is to try and pull some of those habits into how we do things here. See a little intervention necessary perhaps over there. Right, sorry. Where are we? I've lost my place. Okay. Then aside from the garden things, our Out and About program, the sort of scout, semi-scout badges you might have seen for each child achieving things, that's lost a bit of momentum. So we've gone with putting a process into place whereby the classes will cover those badges in what they teach and how they teach. So the children are getting the outdoor skills, out and about skills, as well as doing them in class. And they're being attacked deliberately instead of incidentally. That whole process was I think over the years, I don't think we were running as best we could. So that it's now enforced, socially, emotionally, of course, enforced process whereby the children will do, as an example, let's say make a bird feeder or purify water. I was coming back in about 3 minutes. Huh? Thanks, Susan. Do you do that? I can still keep talking. Yeah? Thanks. We're also going to chuck in some extra grade 7 leadership badge, which we're in the process of refining. That'll be chucked into the pipeline as well. And then hopefully, well not hopefully, children will I think be more, what's the best word? Inspired, thanks. Inspired, pulled into the system, pulled into the drive of things. And then as far as that goes, we've got termly traditions, which we're going to push as well for our outdoor program. So there's conquer season, there's marble season, there's fort building, whatever left out. Bobsledding is another one. And then our outdoor classroom days each term. That for me, it's one of the magnificences of this place, that we can take a class outdoor for a day. Mrs. Abbott was doing some science work earlier, go and do a leaf scavenger hunt. And after having done the dichotomous key, then go and find all the bits and pieces out there. So we're getting children out. I don't need to say we're fighting against technology, because we're using technology. And that's where we're going from there. Our trips and hikes are continuing. And I mean, SEL has spoken about, and I think you as parents will know as well, that our camps and our trips really are a huge differentiator for other schools out there. There's so much you can learn on a camp. I think we know this as well. So our hiking program, we've altered slightly. I think some children were on the hike. The first term we took a hike off to Hamwa, and it wasn't just a hike. We've evolved that and grown that as well. So there's a bit of camping experience. We'd had a little sort of survival theme where our self-tripping fishing rod didn't work all that well, but the crabs were well fed anyway. And then second term we're off to forgotten the name. Royal Natal, there we go. A little introduction to fly fishing for those who can do it as well. So those who'd like to learn about it. So we are pushing that kind of education as well. It's not just about being in a classroom. One comment. In conclusion, basically our philosophy is that the outdoor experience should be remembered for a lifetime. You were here for such a short time, and life does become so complicated after this. And we've got integrated learning in our outdoor experiences, whether it's through play or in the grounds or in our adventures further afield. But really, for me, as a school, we've got so much on our doorstep, and all of us as teachers feel the same thing. And it's about honouring that and making the most of what we can for the children. So that's me in a nutshell. I hope I haven't ADHD you too much with my jumping around, but notes I'll go through what I think is applicable, and then let's make this more of a journey as a team, I think, than incidentally.